Hey guys, so in this video I'll be explaining basically everything you need to know about Doom's TACs. Although the beginning might be super obvious to most of you, I recommend pausing the video at each step to make sure that you've mastered every concept. Otherwise, you can just check out the description and go to the part that interests you the most. Okay, so for fundamentals with Doom, let's start off with his bread and butter TAC. It's as simple as it gets, and it works absolutely everywhere. If you're not feeling confident about a particular TAC, especially if you're mid-screen, just do this one. It's kinda lame, but even Chris G does it, so don't feel too bad. The most important part of this TAC is the M&Ms. I'm talking about the string of M's near the end of the combo. And basically, every Doom TAC uses this to an extent, and it's absolutely critical for infinites. So, as you can see, I'm doing 6 mediums, each hitting twice, and then dashing after every 2. I finish it off with a Butter Gun. And this is the most reliable version, although it's also the lamest. If you go faster, you can squeeze in some extra mediums and some dashes, and even some lights on the last rep if you're feeling fancy. But your only goal when you're doing M&Ms is to keep the enemy exactly at your level so that the Butter Gun at the end hits exactly 3 times. And the third hit causes the soft knockdown you need to finish your combo. So for now, just become consistent with the simple version and then add in the lights and everything to be fancy. Once you've got that down, it's time to use Doom's Side Plasma Beam. The only thing you have to keep in mind is that your enemy needs to fall onto the beam and then bounce twice. It's that second bounce that causes soft knockdown that you need. That means that for all your setups, you want your enemy to be slightly above and in front of you before actually doing the plasma beam. So, in the example from before, after the Butter Gun connects for 3 hits, just do medium into light plasma beam, and most enemies will just bounce perfectly. That's all you need to know for plasma beam right now, but there's a couple additional things later for infinites. The final part of some TACs is the staircase fashion in which Doom climbs enemies in the corner. You want to be below your enemy and be super close, basically touching them. The best way to practice this is with his up TAC in the corner like I'm showing right now. Also, whenever you enter flight mode like this, I recommend hitting twice with the first medium and only once with the second. Final one works best for you though. Putting all these things together, you end up with a TAC that does really good damage and ends with a soft knockdown. To finish it, catch the enemy on the way down with a medium just as you're about to hit the floor. Then do a heavy molecular shield into Sphere Flame. For up, like before, do 2 double hitting mediums and get below your enemy. Then staircase up, do your M&Ms and bring them down. For side, do a down forward dash into flight right away to keep them in the corner. Then do M&Ms and bring them down. For down, do 2 lights, 2 mediums into a light plasma beam. Catch them with a medium into a staircase. Then fly, M&Ms, and bring them back down. Some characters are tricky though. For example, Zero just won't bounce in plasma beam this way. A good way to be safe is to let the first medium hit twice. There's a catch though. Doom will have dropped a bit closer to the ground, which will make catching them on the way down harder or potentially impossible. Now for the fun part. If you can do everything in the video so far, you can do infinites with little to no extra work. For Doom's infinites, there are 2 things you need to focus on. First is the actual hit-stop move you need to connect to start and continue the infinite. In this case, it's Doom's light. Visually, you'll know it's connected properly if it's angled slightly downward when it connects. Second is how you bring the character down to the ground so you can hit them with your light. You'll notice that in most TACs described in this video, you catch the enemy at the end with a medium. Basically, you need to catch them with a light now to get the infinite started. Doing this with our previous setups is insane though. We're not all Marlin Pie. Technically, all our previous setups work, but hey, so does this if you're good enough. Spoiler though, I'm not. So basically, it all comes down to setups to make getting the hit stop punch as consistent as possible. And as you may know, there are 2 main methods. The first one is super simple to set up, but getting the punch is kinda difficult. The second one is a bit harder to set up, but it makes getting the hit stop hit very easy. You should learn both setups since they each have their strength depending on the situation. First up is the Butter Gun Infinite. It's easy to set up, but harder to connect. Basically, the setup is to bring the enemy as close to the ground as possible by ending your M&Ms with a down dash instead of a forward dash on your last rep. Then, time the hit stop punch correctly. Remember to slow down your two mediums on your before last rep to let your opponent drop down a bit. As always, practice is key. But there is a visual cue I find useful to time this punch. I always look at the enemy as they're falling from the last butter gun hit and press light as soon as they get really close to the ground. When you're doing this, remember to hold up forward so you can get the second light on your way up consistently. There's not much else to say about this other than the setups I recommend to get into this position. Also, the infinite continuation I'm showing is optimal for training, but not for actual matches. I'll show the better ones at the end of this video. For up TACs, do the two mediums like before into staircase, but go into plasma beam instead of flight. You'll need to judge the height of the character compared to you when you do this, but the most common variation is to have the first medium hit twice and the second hit once. Then catch the enemy at the bottom with a medium into flight into M&Ms. A lame variation is to go directly into your S-foot dive into flight into M&Ms. But hey, it works too, and pre-infinite damage doesn't matter, since it's an infinite. Side can be tricky. The same setup as before kinda works, with the only variation being a down dash on your third M&M rep instead of forward. But it can also be tricky to get 3 hits from the butter gun this way. The cooler and better way to do this is to dash down forward, wait a second, and hit the enemy from behind with a medium. Then go into flight and M&Ms. The timing can be a bit tricky at first, but it is actually very consistent. For down, pick whatever you want. Seriously, you just can't mess this up. The previous setup works if you want, but if you're just practicing, dash down forward into flight into M&Ms. Okay, now for Plasma Beam Infinites. They have stricter setups, but much easier hit stop links. In the Butter Gun Infinites, the goal was to end your flight with your enemy parallel to you so the butter gun hits 3 times. Also, you want it to be as close to the ground as possible. For Plasma Beam Infinites, you want to be above the ground a fairly precise amount so that, like we discussed before, you can just do medium into light plasma beam, and then that causes the enemy to bounce. The plasma beam needs to be super close to the ground, almost like a tiger knee, when it comes out. That means that as soon as the beam is over, you're completely set up to hit with the hit stop light. The infinite continuation I'm showing here is not only the easiest version, but it also happens to be the mid-screen variation. Props to Mal and Pi for discovering this. The main reason that this variation is awesome is that there's almost no timing required. You just hit the buttons in order as fast as you can perform them until the enemy is dead. Neat. Now for the setups. Everyone basically has their own that fits their style. I'll show a couple variations, but experiment and find which one you find the easiest. I can't stress enough just how varied these setups can be. Look on YouTube for alternatives if you don't like the ones I do. For both up and side TACs with Doom, your height isn't likely to be consistent. To make these reliable, you need to adjust your starter depending on the height you find yourself at. This actually makes these TACs surprisingly lenient. All you need to learn is whether your height requires medium, light plasma beam, or light, medium, light plasma beam. I'm going to show several examples, but it'll be up to you to decide which starter to use. Remember that if you screw up and find yourself too high or too low, the Butter Gun TAC still works. For down, you have tons of options. I love down. The most common one is also the lamest. You just dash forward, medium into flight into M&Ms. Then go into the infinite with medium, light plasma beam. Similarly, a weird version I came up with is just to dash down forward into flight as soon as you can. Then do M&Ms and finish with light, medium, light plasma beam. And my favorite for last. This only works on characters that have normal hurt boxes, so no Tron or Zero for example. It's the most reliable and looks the coolest in my opinion. Mid-screen infinites are actually not that bad either. Down specifically is super simple. For up, we're going to dash forward and catch them at an approximate height on our way down. Then, bounce their height with your first couple M&Ms and then dash under them to get the plasma beam starter. For side, I came up with a setup that has as little timing as possible. Basically, just copy the inputs on the screen as fast as Doom can perform them. I find this to actually be super reliable for some reason, so try it out. The most common one that I don't particularly like uses a similar starter to the down TAC in the corner. I find it very character specific, so take that for what you will. For down TACs, just instantly dash down forward into light plasma beam, and you're done. Although it's not always required, know that my first rep when starting the infinite this way always hits twice with the first medium. It just makes sure that the height is correct between Doom and the enemy. You can also start off similarly to the second side TAC I showed. And to conclude, here's another extension for TAC infinites in the corner. The benefit to this version is obvious. It does a lot of damage between hit-stop hits, which are arguably the hardest part of TAC infinites. This means more damage and less chances of screwing it up. You can also switch it up with the other two methods you've learned for style points. Anyway, that's about it. I didn't show off anything super stylish in here, so I recommend looking up other vids on YouTube once you've got these down. And once again, if you don't like one of these variations, there are so many other ones you can find on YouTube. Plus, I probably forgot to talk about some things, so let me know in the comments if you want me to cover something else. In any case, hope you guys enjoyed this, and have fun in the lab.